How to talk with God in times of grief. I speak those words slowly, like placing candles along a dark hallway, and I notice how my breathing changes as I say them. When loss entered my life, I didn't know how to pray. My tongue felt unfamiliar in my own mouth, my chest was tight, and my mind ran in circles searching for what could not be found. In those first hours, I learned to begin with breath. I would sit, put a hand over my heart, and inhale as if my lungs were holding the ocean. I would exhale and let my shoulders fall. One breath, another. Then, without any speeches or polished lines, I would say, "God, I'm here." Those 3 words were my raft on a restless sea. I didn't need to explain the storm. The storm explained itself. I just needed to show up. I learned that God is not far from a broken heart, and showing up is a prayer all on its own. I practice returning to the smallest prayer I know, not out of poverty but devotion, because small things endure what grand speeches forget. I breathe until the muscles behind my ribs stop clenching like fists and begin opening like hands. I tell God, "Hold the part of me that still waits by the door," and I picture him doing it without hurry. I remember that showing up is the opposite of disappearing, and presence is love's first promise. I let the kettle hum and call it a gentle bell, a summons to be here, not elsewhere. I place my palm over my heart and feel its stubborn drum say, "You are alive." I answer, "Yes, alive, and yours," and the room grows kinder around me. I have begun to meet my mornings with a deliberate slowness that feels like reverence, as if the day itself were a fragile cup I'm learning to hold with 2 hands, not because it will spill, but because honoring it changes me. I sit in the half-light and let the kettle's soft rumble be my call to prayer, not a trumpet but a steadying drum beneath the ribs. I picture my breath gathering all the scattered pieces of me and returning them like birds to a single branch. "God, gather me," I say, not in a rush, not to get somewhere else, simply to be entirely here. The light lifts along the window frame, and I think of how grief taught me to notice the smallest movements of mercy. It is not that the ache vanishes. It remains, like a river under ice, still moving even when it seems still. But I feel held, and in the holding I remember that presence is not the absence of pain. It is the refusal of love to step away. I began to greet the morning as if it were a gentle visitor. Before the kettle finished its quiet song, I placed my hand over my chest and said, "God, meet me here." I watched the steam rise like a small prayer I could see. I didn't rush to fill the silence. I let the day arrive at a kind pace. A calm start didn't remove the ache, but it gave me a soft place to set it down. I treat the doorway each morning as a small threshold liturgy. Hand on the frame, breath slow, eyes soft, heart willing. I whisper, "I cross into the day with you," and step forward as if entering a sanctuary disguised as sidewalks and screens. I water the plants and notice which leaves tilt toward light as though they remembered something my body forgets by noon. I make the bed with patient hands, tucking hope under the corners so I can find it again tonight. I choose one sentence for the day, "Keep me gentle," or "Teach me to receive," and let it ride in my pocket like a friendly note. I pack a piece of fruit as if I were packing mercy, something sweet for the inevitable hour when I fade. I kiss the day on the forehead and ask it to be kind to everyone I meet, including me. I made a small corner of my home into a sanctuary. A chair by the window, a single candle, a worn book, and a folded blanket became my altar of ordinary things. I told God, "This space is yours and mine." When I sat there, I breathed a little slower and noticed how compassion gathered like light on a table. Even 5 minutes there steadied me for the hours ahead. I set tiny altars that look like ordinary corners. Lamp, chair, window, blanket, and crown them with my breath. I sit, and the chair becomes a companion, the window a messenger, the lamp a star I can touch. I lay my worries like bread on the table and ask God to slice them into pieces I can chew. I do not ask for a feast. I ask not to go hungry for courage. I repeat one sentence all day, be near, until it becomes a heartbeat I can lean against. I light a candle and let the flame keep vigil when I cannot. I end by whispering, thank you for coming close, and discover he never left. When the house is quiet enough that I can hear the hum in the walls, I take out the small journal where I keep a daily mercy. No essays, no grand conclusions, just one line sturdy enough to carry me across a thin afternoon. I write about a neighbor's wave that arrived the exact second I doubted my belonging, or the way the rain made the street smell like the first day of school, or a line from scripture that rested in me like a warm stone. There are days I forget to write and think I've lost ground, but I haven't. Mercy is patient and waits on the porch of the next morning. I read back over older entries and see how God's kindness threaded through weeks I thought were empty. The record is not a ledger I must balance. It is a quilt pieced from leftover cloth, each square the color of a kept promise. I touch the paper and pray, teach me to remember what remembers me, and the page answers with quiet fidelity. I keep a quiet ledger of names I hand to God the way a traveler hands a letter to a trustworthy courier. I write each name slowly so the ink has time to learn the shape of affection. I add a few words, peace, clarity, rest, and sometimes nothing at all because love understands shorthand. I close the notebook and press it between my palms like a prayer stone, trusting delivery beyond my reach. Later, when a text arrives or a face crosses my path, I sense how unseen networks of grace are always humming. I am not the manager of outcomes. I am the keeper of a small lamp that stays lit. This is enough light to walk by. I remember the day I spoke the loss out loud, saying the name, saying what happened, naming the date. My voice trembled, felt like tearing a bandage from tender skin. But I discovered that truth told to God does not wound more. It begins to heal. I said, God, I lost someone I love, and I paused long enough to feel the weight of that sentence. I noticed a quiet answer rise in me. Not a sentence, not a thunderclap, simply a steadying. The room did not change, but I did. From that day forward, I gave God sentences as small as crumbs. This hurts. I don't know what to do. Hold me. I didn't try to sound spiritual. I didn't try to be strong. I gave him my real voice, and in return he gave me a place to set it down. I keep learning that honesty with God is not a courtroom. It is a kitchen where truth sits and eats without being rushed. I tell him when I'm angry and when I'm fine but not fine, and I do not edit the edges. I say the name I miss out loud so love doesn't wither under silence. I ask, where were you then? And I stay long enough to hear, and still hear. I don't receive a dissertation. I receive a steadying, like a chair pulled out for a tired guest. I sip water and let it preach patience to my restless mouth. I bless the ache for telling me what mattered and still matters. I used to think prayer required the right words lined up like soldiers, disciplined and precise. But grief has taught me to let my petitions wander like children in a field, curious and unafraid. Some days I pray by naming everything I can see from the window and asking God to bless it. The sparrow on the wire, the delivery truck with its cargo of small hopes, the woman walking a dog that looks too cheerful for the weather. Other days I sit in the kind of silence that feels like a slow-growing tree. Nothing appears to happen and yet roots are finding water. I ask fewer why questions now, not because they are forbidden, but because I have discovered better ones. Where are you in this room? What do you want me to notice? Who needs the tenderness I am craving? These questions lead me not to answers I can frame, but to a presence that frames me, and being framed by love is the only meaning that does not betray itself at night. I kept 3 small stones in my pocket: gratitude, memory, and hope. When waves rose, I touched one stone and named a thank you. I touched the second and said a memory I wanted to bless. I held the third and whispered, "Lead me forward." My hands prayed for me when my mind felt crowded. Walking became a moving conversation. I chose a simple route and let my steps match the words, "I am held." A bench halfway felt like a chapel. I paused there, looked at the sky, and said the name I miss. I asked God to stitch my breath, my steps, and my longing into one steady thread. I stood again and felt the thread hold. I take walks that do not measure fitness but faithfulness. Steps stitched to prayer the way beads string together. Left foot, I am. Right foot, held. And the rhythm writes its quiet poem in my marrow. A bench becomes my pew. A sky becomes my roof. A breeze becomes the choir's soft inhale. I say the name I love and wait for the answering hush that feels like a nod. I watch birds land on a wire thin as grief, balancing by instinct, not certainty. I ask to be that free inside what still trembles. I stand and keep walking, not brave first, beloved first, and then brave. In the middle hours, when attention frays and courage drifts, I practice a tiny noon reset that feels like a psalm with sleeves rolled up. I stand, unclench my jaw, and drink water as if returning a river to its course. I look out a window, even a small office square of sky will do, and say, "Thank you for blue, for gray, for whatever is true." I place my palm over my chest where the ache sometimes hums like a low machine and bless that hum as evidence of love, not failure. I send a message to one person, thinking of you, so connection doesn't have to knock twice. I forgive the morning for not being more than it was and invite the afternoon to be enough. Then I return to the work of being human with one faithful breath. Sometimes my prayer was a single syllable, "Help." Other times it was a breath that never quite became a word. Silence became one of my holiest practices. I used to fill every quiet with noise, music, chores, endless scrolling, because silence made the ache louder. But I learned that silence is not empty. It is space for God to come close. I would sit with a cup of tea gone cold and listen to the hum of the house. In that hush, memories would wander in, and tears would follow, and I let them. Tears are prayers that our mouths cannot carry. I did not apologize for them. I let them roll and I whispered, "Receive this, God." And I sensed he did. I learned to speak the name of the one I love out loud, not in a whisper of fear, but with honor. I told God stories that made me smile, details no one else might remember. The room warmed when love entered it in this way. I sensed heaven leaning close to listen. When pain pressed on my chest, I called it love's echo instead of a threat. I told God, "This ache is the sound of what mattered." Naming it that way didn't erase the weight, but it changed its texture. Love's echo reminded me I was not broken. I was faithful. It reminded me that what we shared still shapes me for good. I learned to cook slowly, as if making a meal were a psalm. I chopped vegetables and said, "Thank you for color." I stirred and said, "Thank you for warmth." I set a plate and said, "Thank you for provision." I ate with attention, even when the chair across from me was empty, and I asked God to feed the parts of me that hunger for more than bread. I learned to let music carry me the way a river carries leaves without asking who they used to belong to. A cracked voice is not a failure. It is a truth teller with nothing to prove. Hymns find the corners where dust has settled and lift it like light. A single cello note can become a bridge over the winter in my chest. I sing softly in the kitchen so sorrow knows it is welcome but not king. I drive with worship murmuring like rain on the windshield. I arrive someplace gentler than where I started. Cooking has become one of my longer liturgies, a way of telling the truth about hunger and provision with onions and heat and time. I cut slowly, listening for the small click of the knife against wood, and I remember how patience changes texture. Carrots soften, garlic sweetens, grief loosens its grip. Over the steam I whisper prayers that rise and vanish, trusting that disappearing is not the same as being unheard. Some offerings must become invisible to become nourishment. When the food is ready, I played it like a psalm, simple, honest, repeating what is true. Sometimes I set a spare place and a flower, because ceremony softens sorrow's edges. Sometimes I share half with a neighbor, because love doubles when given. Always I taste for gratitude, which is not denial but delight smuggled into ordinary hours. Nighttime needed tenderness, so I gave it a path. I dimmed lights early, turned off the noise, and read one comforting line I could hold. I asked God to quiet the corners of my mind where worry hides. I pictured His hand over my forehead, and I let my breathing follow that imagined touch. Sleep found me more easily when I was gentle with the dark. Evening has become my school of gentle transitions, where switches are sacraments and lamps are teachers. I move through the rooms, turning down the day the way you dim a stage before a tender scene. Softer bulbs, slower steps, quieter breath. I bless the sink as I rinse the last cup, the table as I clear it, the floor as I sweep what the day has shed. I lay out tomorrow's kindness. Keys ready, sweater waiting, a note to remember mercy before emails. I light a candle and let its steady flame remind me that small constancies defeat large shadows. I whisper, guard my mind, keep my dreams, and trust that someone loves me in the dark. Then I let the house exhale and practice doing the same. I practice Sabbath like a quiet rebellion against the empire of endlessness. I turn down the volume on achievement and turn up the volume on being. I nap as if trusting God with the planet were a holy assignment. I walk without counting the steps and call it prayer for my legs. I let the sink hold dishes that can wait, and I bless the waiting. I read one line and let it stretch across the whole afternoon like shade. I end the day unhurried, which is to say, human again. There were days I felt angry, not at people, not at doctors or traffic or weather, but at the impossible unfairness of goodbye. I did not hide that from God. I learned that He can hold the hard words we're afraid to say. I told Him, I don't understand, and this feels wrong, and where were you in that moment? None of those questions pushed Him away. On the contrary, they opened a door in the darkness and fresh air began to move through the room. I discovered that honesty is not a threat to faith. It's the soil where faith grows deeper roots. When I brought my anger and confusion, God did not argue with me. He held me still long enough for dignity to return to my voice. Over time, the questions didn't vanish, but they softened. They became part of a conversation instead of a courtroom. I hold space for anger without handing it the microphone. I say, this feels wrong, and let that truth stand unshamed. I ask God to sift my heat from my harm. I move my body so energy can exit in honesty, not sarcasm. I write the sharp words and then bless the margin instead of sending the page. I breathe until my voice remembers its dignity. Then I speak with both courage and care. On the calendar of my heart, there are dates circled in a quiet ink that only I can see, and as they near, I feel a low tide pulling at the day's edges. I do not argue with that moon. I plan for it. I choose a candle before the day arrives and write a letter I will never mail. And I ask one friend to text me the simplest sentence, with you today. Then, when the date comes, I move more slowly than the world, like someone carrying a full bowl. I read the letter aloud and let the words find their true weight. I cry if there are tears, and if not, I don't summon them. I cook a favorite meal and taste the memory without trying to swallow the whole past. I end the day looking at the candle's last inch of light and saying, "You are stronger than the night," not as a boast, but as a benediction over a love that refuses to be extinguished. The ache remains, refined and companioned. I found the simplest prayers were the strongest scaffolding. I wrote them on paper and taped them to the bathroom mirror, the refrigerator, the back of my phone. God, be near. God, carry me. God, keep my love alive. When words were hard to remember, I used my body to pray. I would place my hand over my chest as if I were holding an old photograph. I would stand with my palms open at my sides and say, "I'm not hiding." I would walk around the block and match my steps to a rhythm of trust. Left, right, I'm held. In the grocery store, I took one extra breath before answering small talk. In the car, at red lights, I would say the name of the one I lost and then a thank you for the years we had. Grief and gratitude are not enemies. They are companions walking the same road in different shoes. I practice breath prayers that fit between doorbells and deadlines. Inhale, be near. Exhale, keep me. Inhale, give light. Exhale, guide me. Inhale, I'm yours. Exhale, you're mine. I do this while stirring soup, waiting at red lights, standing in elevators. My lungs become a chapel no one can close. God meets me in the spaces everyone else rushes past. I have learned to trust the second breath of prayer, the one that follows the first brave whisper and carries it farther than I can. The first breath says, "Help," and the second breath hears the answer beginning, "I am here." The first breath says, "I can't," and the second breath remembers, "We can." The first breath is a match in the dark. The second breath is the candle catching, steady and bright. I live inside this rhythm now, like a tide that keeps the shoreline honest. When fear rehearses disaster, I rehearse these two breaths until my pulse becomes a metronome for peace. Between them, I find enough space to choose love again. Celebrations became tender ground. I learned to let joy and longing sit at the same table. I laughed without apology and cried without shame, sometimes in the same minute. I told God, "Hold both." He did. The day ended softer when I stopped making my heart choose. I relearned celebration without pretending everything is easy. I show up to birthdays with both cake and quiet. I dance in the kitchen even when the playlist makes me cry. I toast to what was and to what can still be good. I take photos that honor presence rather than perfection. I watch children laugh and remember heaven loves to sound like that. Joy and longing share the same plate and call it communion. I asked for help and let it arrive in awkward, beautiful ways. A neighbor took out my trash. A friend sat in silence. Someone sent soup I didn't know I needed. I told God, "Teach me to receive." Receiving didn't make me weak. It braided me back into the human family. I felt less alone because I wasn't trying to be a one-person army. I choose generosity as a language that grief and hope both understand. I bake bread and share half because love multiplies better than it divides. I write notes that say, "With you," and mean every letter. I hold doors a heartbeat longer and remember how I needed that pause. I give anonymously sometimes so my ego doesn't spoil the offering. I serve not to erase sorrow but to give it a purpose beyond my edges. God turns my small ladle into a river I cannot measure. Grief moved like weather, and I stopped arguing with the sky. On bright days, I moved freely. On heavy days, I moved gently. I told God, "Be my shelter whether I'm in the sun or under cloud." The forecast changed often, but his presence stayed steady. That steadiness became my climate. I began speaking to God about the memories. I told him stories. I told him how laughter used to fill the kitchen and how certain songs feel like open windows. I told him what I missed. The way they mispronounced words, the laugh snort that happened when they really broke up, the way their hand found mine in a crowd. And then I asked for courage to keep those memories bright without letting them cut. I learned to bless what was. I would say, God, I bless the love we shared. I bless the days we were given. I bless the lessons I carry forward. Blessing is a way to talk about the past while making space for the future. I keep memory as a lantern, not a chain, and light it when the room feels thin. I tell the stories that make my mouth tilt toward laughter. I mention the quirks, the mispronunciations, the tender embarrassments that shaped our days. I refuse to sanctify the past into something it never was. I bless it as it is. I let photos be windows, not prisons, opening to gratitude instead of grief's interrogation. I ask God to guard what I cannot keep and to keep what I cannot guard. Love answers by staying. On the hardest mornings, when the bed felt heavy as stone, I prayed a morning prayer of simple tasks. God, help me get to the shower. Help me choose clothes. Help me take one step and then the next. If noon came and I had only done those 3 things, I thanked him for them. There is dignity in small victories. In the afternoon, I practiced the 3 anchors: water, light, and voice. I poured a glass of water and drank it slowly, asking God to wash through my tiredness. I went outside for a minute of sunlight, even if the sky was dim, and asked God to warm what felt cold inside. I called a friend or sent a voice note, and by hearing my own voice care for another, I felt cared for too. In the evening, I would sit by a window and say, "Into your hands, I place this day." Night after night, that prayer became a bridge. I crossed it and I slept. I planted something small in the yard, a rosemary sprig near the steps. I called it a living memory. I brushed it with my fingers and carried the scent with me into the house. Let my love be like this, I prayed. Rooted, fragrant, quietly useful. Watching it grow felt like a sermon I didn't have to preach. Returning to work asked for patience. I set fewer goals and blessed each one when it was done. God, receive this email. Receive this call. Receive this hour I showed up. Output mattered less than presence. Excellence became faithfulness over time, not perfection on demand. I returned to work with less thunder and more rain, steady and good for roots. I measure the day by presence, not performance. I write fewer emails and add more sincerity to each one. I start meetings with breath and end them with thanks. I let excellence grow from attention rather than fear. I close the laptop like a sanctuary gate and whisper, "Enough for today." Grace answers, "Yes and well done." Work asks for a different kind of prayer, and I am learning to give it gladly, turning tasks into offerings that do not require applause to be real. I invite God into my inbox, into the part of me that wants to prove my worth by the speed of replies and the polish of sentences. Make me faithful more than impressive, I ask, and choose one good thing at a time. Excellence becomes the fruit of attention gently applied, not the panic of perfection. I pause before each call and picture the person on the other end as someone God already holds. My tone changes more than any script could. At day's end, I close the laptop like an altar gate and whisper, "Receive the work and its limits." And I mean both parts. I let go of perfection like releasing a held breath. Good enough started to sound holy. Dishes washed, bed made, a text answered, "That was a good day." I told God, "Thank you for simple completion." Peace settled in the space where harsh self-judgment used to live. Children's questions came like small lanterns too. Where is heaven? Do they see us? I didn't rush to give grand answers. I said, God is near and love never ends. And I let that be enough for both of us. Their trust taught my heart how to rest again. A child asked me why I breathed so deeply before I answered difficult questions, and I told them the truth. Because breath invites God to answer with me. We practiced together, counting to 4 on the inhale, to 6 on the exhale, and smiling at the space between. I taught them a pocket prayer they could carry to school. Be near. Keep me. They taught me how to notice ants on the sidewalk and the way sunlight makes chalk brighter. And I took that lesson into my grown-up rooms. We swapped courage like marbles and felt rich by the end of the walk. I realized again that hope is often small-handed and low to the ground. Heaven loves to speak at child height. I wrote letters to my future self and dated them. You survived today. Remember the candle. Remember the bench. Remember the kindness that arrived before you asked. I sealed the envelope and tucked it away. When I opened it weeks later, I saw how God had carried me frame by frame. I trusted seeds I could not yet see. I asked God to plant courage where fear used to camp, patience where hurry once ruled, tenderness where sharp edges cut. I watered those invisible places with small acts of love. Sprouts appeared in conversations, in mornings, in my own voice when it sounded gentler than before. Chores became prayers with sleeves rolled up. I folded laundry and asked for a warmed heart. I swept the floor and asked for a clear mind. I opened windows and asked for fresh mercy to move through the rooms. Ordinary tasks turned into a liturgy of care. I treat chores as prayers with sleeves rolled up, a liturgy that smells like soap and warm water. Folding towels becomes a blessing for future fatigue, already anticipated and already met. Sweeping the floor is an invitation for cluttered thoughts to exit politely. Opening windows is a declaration that stale air is not my inheritance. Taking out the trash is repentance with wheels. Goodbye to what no longer serves. Making the bed is a covenant with tomorrow's version of me. I sign each act with, receive this, God, and feel received too. Mending has become a way of praying with my hands when words feel like loose thread. I sew the button that has been waiting for weeks and ask God to secure the places where my attention slips. I patch a small tear and bless all the edges in me that are learning not to unravel. I oil a squeaky hinge and ask for grace where my sentences refuse to open cleanly. I glue the chipped mug because its handle fits my hand like memory, and I name it good that things can be both imperfect and beloved. I stack the fixed and the faithful on the shelf and feel strangely repaired. I remember that redemption often sounds like a quiet click back into place. Rest became a practice of trust. I set the phone aside, closed my eyes, and gave God the shift. I'm off duty for a while, I said. But you are not. I woke lighter when I let the world be held by hands stronger than mine for an hour. Surrender is a muscle. It grows with use. I learned the grace of anniversaries. The calendar can be a tender thing. When the date approached, birthdays, holidays, the day the call came, I told God ahead of time. It's coming, I said, and I don't want to be ambushed by this day. I asked for a simple plan. A candle to light, a place to visit, a note to write, a meal to share. I invited one trusted person to check in. Then, on the day, I let quiet rituals do the heavy lifting. I lit the candle and whispered, "Your light is stronger than the night." I wrote a letter and told God I would hand it to him, since I could not deliver it anywhere else. I cooked their favorite dish and tasted it slowly, thankful that love can be served even when empty chairs remain. The ache was present, but so was gentleness. That day did not own me. God did. I hold anniversaries with tenderness, wrapping them in ritual so they do not bruise the day. A candle becomes my companion. A letter becomes my altar. A favorite meal becomes communion. I ask one friend to walk with me by text, by prayer, by silence. I refuse to wrestle the calendar. I choose to walk with it. I tell the story again, not to reopen the wound, but to irrigate it with remembrance. I bless the ache for its honesty and the gentleness for its medicine. Night arrives, and I discover I was carried, not conquered. I rewrote the calendar with compassion. Anniversaries had rituals ready: candle, letter, walk, call. Ordinary days had anchors: water, light, voice. I asked God to meet me in each square, not just the hard ones. The year took on a rhythm that felt human and kind. Time and I are becoming friends who walk at a pace I can bless. I no longer argue with its seasons as if summer owed me autumn's wisdom or winter owed me spring's surprise. I wear a watch more loosely now, as if minutes were beads in a rosary and not coins to be hoarded. I honor small increments: 5 calm breaths, a tidy counter, a sincere apology. I release the myth of behind and meet myself where I actually am, which is where God always meets me. I keep a calendar that remembers anniversaries and also remembers to add blank squares for mercy to write on. In this friendship with time, I age into tenderness instead of urgency. I walked room to room and blessed the air. Peace in this kitchen, comfort in this hallway, rest in this bedroom, welcome at this door. I imagined God filling each space the way sunlight fills a quiet morning. Blessing changed the way I moved through the house. I became a guest of grace in my own home. I tend my home as if tenderness had a housekeeping list. Fresh flowers in a jar to remind me beauty is renewable. A soft blanket within reach for the moment courage gets cold. A note by the door that says, "I am held," touched on the way out and in. A playlist for storms and a basket for mail so chaos has somewhere to live. A corner for prayer that smells like wax and hope. A table set for ordinary miracles. I visited a place that held our history, a park path, a bookstore corner, and brought a small token back. A leaf pressed in a journal. A ticket stub kept safe. I told God, this is not a shrine to sadness. It's a marker of love. Holding the token steadied me when memory felt too large to manage. I made a gentle pilgrimage to a place that remembers us. A park bench with initials carved shyly in wood, and brought no agenda except attention. I sat long enough for the wind to choose a direction and for my breath to match it. I said the name I love and let the silence say it back in its own way. I left a smooth stone under the bench. Not a shrine, but a signpost that kindness has passed this way. On the path home, I noticed how the light kept touching leaves like a blessing and how my steps landed more softly. I did not leave the ache there. I brought it home transformed, like bread carried warm in a paper bag. The evening tasted honest and good. Some afternoons I returned to places that hold a residue of our life together. A bench by the pond, the aisle near the hardback novels, the corner booth where the server still remembers the order. I go without fanfare and stay just long enough to feel the stitch between what was and what is, not pulling it tight, not letting it fray. I bring home a token and set it on a small shelf that has become an altar of ordinary relics. These are not talismans to ward off sorrow. They are witnesses that love made real things in real time and space. I pray, teach me to carry memory as a lantern, not a chain, and feel the weight redistribute into warmth I can hold without burning. The car turned into a chapel with wheels. At red lights, I breathed and said one line of prayer. On long drives, I let worship music trace the edges of my worry and soften them. I arrived more present when I let God ride shotgun. Travel time became tender time. I used the car as a moving cloister where frustration learns patience with every stoplight. I bless the driver who cuts in as someone in a hurry I cannot see. I pray for the city street by street, naming schools, hospitals, shelters, homes. I let gratitude rise for the gift of getting from here to there. I turn down the radio and listen to my breath getting honest. I ask God to drive my attention as much as my wheels. I arrive more present than when I left. Even the car has become a cloister with seatbelts, a moving sanctuary where stoplights are invitations instead of interruptions. I breathe a single line at each stop. Be near, guide me, keep me gentle. and let traffic tutor my impatience into prayer. On longer drives, a hymn dissolves my defended edges, and a simple chorus gathers my scattered attention back into one place. I arrive not fixed but softened. The way rain doesn't change a city's architecture, but changes everything about the air you breathe as you walk through it. Scripture became a river I could step into without drowning. I did not read to conquer chapters. I read to receive a sentence. One sentence carried me all day. I held on to promises like a rope dropped down into a ravine. I am with you. I will never leave you. I will restore your soul. I spoke those lines into rooms where I felt alone. I wrote them on small cards and tucked them into my pocket. When panic swelled, I pressed my hand against my coat and felt the card, the ink, the weight of a promise. I learned that God's word is not a lecture. It's an embrace. It doesn't demand that I run. It teaches me to rest. I borrow the oldest words when mine feel too young to bear the weight. The Lord is my shepherd, I say, and I feel led even when I cannot see the path. Underneath are the everlasting arms, and I stop falling through my thoughts. Peace I leave with you, and my breath slows to match the promise. I tuck these phrases into pockets and press them when panic rises. They are not magic, but they are faithful, and faithfulness is a miracle with calluses. I sleep with Scripture like a lantern left on low. I return often to Scripture as if it were a well at the center of town, where you lower your empty bucket and hear, before it even touches water, the echo that tells you you're not alone. I take one line and carry it like bread in my pocket. Underneath are the everlasting arms. When panic rises, I press the words against the inside of my mouth as if they could dissolve there and enter my bloodstream. I'm no longer ashamed to read the same promise for a week. Repetition is not failure, it is formation. As waves are not bored of the shore they keep remaking. The word does not scold me into motion. It teaches me to rest and, from rest, to move at mercy's pace. A single lantern is enough to reach the next turn in the road. Scripture came to me like a single lantern, not a stadium of lights. One promise was enough to get me to the next bend in the road. I carried that line in my pocket, on my phone, in my mouth. When fear tried to sprint, I walked at the pace of the promise. Peace kept up with me there. Sometimes my prayer looked like work. I cleaned a drawer and said, "Receive this order, God." I donated clothes and whispered, "Receive this release." I watered plants and asked, "Receive this life I choose to tend." Love needs outlets. When I cooked a meal for a neighbor or held a door a little longer or wrote a note to someone else who was grieving, I discovered that service became a conversation with God. Each kind gesture was a sentence in our dialogue. I wasn't trying to earn anything. I was learning to breathe outward, not just inward. Service keeps saving me from the echo chamber of my own thinking, so I let love borrow my hands without fanfare. I carry groceries up a stairwell and pray for the stories behind closed doors. I write postcards to people I've never met and ask that hope might arrive in their mailbox at just the right hour. I ladle soup and listen for the holiness that rises when hunger is honored without shame. I tidy a neighbor's garden bed and ask God to plant courage where they cannot yet see green. I sign my name where it is needed and stay anonymous when it is better that way. Either way, I leave lighter than I arrived, because giving is a door that opens both ways. I talk to God about guilt, the quiet kind that hides under decisions we made with the light we had. I told him about the what-ifs that chased me like shadows, and I asked him to meet me in them. I sensed him ask me to bring each what-if into the light and tell the truth about it. I did my best. I didn't know then what I know now. I wish it were different. And then I felt invited to release each one, not into thin air, but into hands that do not drop what they hold. Releasing did not erase love. It made space for love to move again. When memories tried to accuse me, I learned to answer them with mercy. God has seen everything, I would say, and He is not condemning me. He is healing me. I have learned to bless my body, not as a grudging concession to limitation, but as agreement with the God who chose flesh and bone, hunger and fatigue, laughter and tears. On days when my jaw is a fist and my shoulders climb toward my ears, I place a hand there and speak peace in a voice I would use with a child who hasn't learned to trust the dark. We are safe, I say, and God is near. Even when my feelings lag behind faith, I stretch until breath slides deeper, walk until the ground steadies me from the soles up, eat slowly enough to recognize nourishment as a daily sacrament. This is prayer too, treating my nervous system not as a problem to fix, but as a friend to comfort home. Gentleness repairs what harshness bruises. Kindness given to the body teaches the soul to exhale. I speak to my body the way I wish the world spoke to every tender thing. Thank you, lungs, for rising. Thank you, feet, for carrying. Thank you, eyes, for noticing. I practice unclenching as a sacrament. Jaw, shoulders, belly, hands. I remind my nervous system that safety is a place, and God is that place. I eat slowly enough to find gratitude hiding between bites. I stretch until breath finds rooms I forgot to rent out to mercy. I rest without apology because rest is trust with the lights off. Forgiveness visited me quietly, especially toward myself. I spoke it like a blessing I could step under. You did what you could with what you knew. Be kind to who you were. I asked God to rinse shame from places where love already did its work. Freedom followed like clean air. Forgiveness continues to arrive like a soft-spoken guest who waits near the threshold until I notice the quiet shape of freedom and invite it in. I start with myself because that's where accusations speak my language. I did the best I could with the light I had, I say, then add the sentence that releases me into growth. Give me more light. I bless the younger me who didn't know and the older me who now does, and ask God to stitch compassion between them so memory doesn't rip when it stretches. When regret tries to rehearse its case, I give mercy the floor. It is a better lawyer and a kinder judge. The verdict is not innocence by ignorance. It is belovedness by grace, and that verdict creates courage to live differently tomorrow. Sometimes I opened old messages and let the past wave from a distance. I thanked God for laughter captured in words, for encouragement typed in late hours, for the mundane notes that now shine with meaning. I didn't stay there long. I dipped in and out like a swimmer who knows the water is cold but refreshing. Gratitude dried me off on the shore. Music helped me speak when my vocabulary disappeared. I made a playlist for grief, and I asked God to guide my choices. Some songs let me cry, others lifted my chin. I sang in a voice that cracked and found that cracked voices sound honest in heaven. I hummed in the kitchen. I sang in the car. I played a slow hymn and watched the light move across the floor and imagined that light was a message sent from a world where all is made right. Songs turned rooms into sanctuaries. They did not erase the empty seat at the table. They kept me from numbing my way through the meal. Nature became a cathedral. I walked under trees and imagined the canopy as a sheltering hand. I watched a small bird land on a wire and thought about how much care it takes to keep a creature so light alive. I stood by water, river, lake, ocean, sink, and let the sound preach to me. Constant, patient, moving around every obstacle. I told God, teach me to flow as this water flows. I picked up a stone, smooth and cool, and carried it in my pocket as a reminder that even something hard can become gentle when time and water do their work. I asked for that kind of patience with my own heart. I brought the stone home and set it beside a small candle. Fire and stone, light and weight. I let them keep vigil on nights I could not. I let nature catechize me in languages my bones remember. Trees keep standing through seasons that disagree with them and call it faithfulness. Rivers argue with rocks by learning their shape, not by shouting. Birds sing in the morning without a weather report. Clouds prove that passing is part of beauty. Mountains show me how to be grand and gentle at once. I go home fluent in hope. Nature remains my cathedral because it is fluent in the language my soul understands when I am too tired to translate. On the path near the river, I greet the water as a teacher, the trees as elders, the sky as a canvas for news from a brighter country. I note the way the river does not argue with rocks but learns their shape, and I ask to be that patient with what will not move in me yet. A heron lifts, and something in my chest lifts with it. Unsolved, but spacious. I go home with leaf light tangled in my hair, and the clean ache of having been seen by something that required nothing of me except presence. Conversations with others became prayers too. I learned to say, "I'm fragile today," and to receive tender listening without rushing to make anyone feel better. I asked a friend, "Will you pray out loud with me?" Hearing someone else say my loved one's name felt like a warm blanket. I joined a small circle where grief was not a problem to fix but a story to carry together. In those circles, I learned new questions to bring to God. What do you want me to remember today? What do you want me to release? Where are you sitting in this room? Often, I sensed him beside me, on the same low couch where tears had worn a path in the fabric. God sits low with those who sit low, and in time, when I stood, I sensed he stood with me. Community is not a cure for grief, but it is a hospital where the holiness of shared breath performs quiet triage on what isolation would let fester. I sit with people who do not rush me toward moral of the story comfort. They bring soup and silence and a listening that feels like room made on a crowded couch. There are weeks I cannot carry a song, so I stand in the back and let the congregation lift words like scaffolding around my wobbling hope. I leave with less weight than I brought, because shared sorrow is halved by presence, and borrowed joy, even for a minute, is still joy. Later I text someone, "How can I be with you this week?" and receive a small assignment that tutors my heart in love's grammar. Show up, stay soft, don't fix, bless. I call my friendships lifelines and practice tugging gently so the rope stays alive. I send voice notes so my care arrives with breath. I ask, "How is your heart?" and wait long enough to find out. I confess my own mess so trust doesn't suffocate under performance. I celebrate their wins like a choir, not a competitor. I say their names in prayer the way I like mine said, slow and with love. We keep each other human on purpose. I went back to church slowly, sitting near the back where exits are close and tears have room. I sang softly, or not at all, and let others carry the melody when I couldn't. I felt the weight lift a little as voices rose around me like a warm blanket. Community held what I couldn't hold alone. Elders became guides in this landscape. I asked someone older, "How did you keep walking?" They answered with stories, not lectures, small faithfulnesses repeated over years. I told God, "Give me a long obedience in a gentle direction." Their lives were maps I could trust. I learned from elders who carry time like a bowl they refuse to spill. Their stories arrive without varnish and with a dignity that steadies my hurry. They teach me to bless slow progress and distrust shiny shortcuts. They show me how grief can sit at the table without eating everyone's dinner. They speak of prayers that took decades and were worth every patient hour. I ask God to braid their wisdom into my pace. I leave with a map scribbled in kindness. At night, I prayed a blessing over my own mind. Peace to the memories that arrive uninvited. Peace to the dreams that run too fast. Peace to the corners where fear hides. I pictured God placing a hand on my forehead, the way a father soothes a child and whispering, "Rest." On mornings after difficult dreams, I didn't interpret them as omens. I took them as reminders that love goes deep, and deep things stir in the night. I made tea, opened the window, and said, "New mercies, new light." My prayer life became a collection of these small, repeatable movements: breath, whisper, candle, step, song, window, light. They stitched my days together like careful thread through fabric that had torn. I practice the examen before sleep, like handing the day back to its maker. Where was I loved? I name it and breathe thanks until gratitude overflows its cup. Where did I resist grace? I name it and feel forgiveness arrive like soft rain. Where am I being invited? I name it and let hope take the first step while I rest. I do not grade myself. I greet myself. I tuck the day in, kiss its forehead, and switch off the light. God keeps watch. I keep still. There are dreams where laughter returns unannounced, carrying the fragrance of kitchens and road trips and ordinary Tuesdays that now shine like stained glass. And I wake with wet cheeks and no fear. I receive those dreams not as omens to decode, but as kindness to behold. And I say, thank you for the visit. The way you thank a friend who slipped a note under your door. On other nights, there is only the blankness of unremarkable sleep. And I bless that too, because rest without spectacle is still a miracle. If a difficult dream finds me, I brew tea and open the window to let morning touch my skin. And I remind my heart that love goes deep and deep things sometimes stir. Dawn comes, rarely with symbols, often like a hand on the shoulder, and I remember, mercy is new, not recycled. Art made space for the unsayable. I sketched a horizon, dabbed paint like prayers, tore paper and made something new from the pieces. My hands understood what my tongue couldn't. I told God, speak through color and texture today. Beauty arrived without a lot of words. I let creativity become a translator for emotions that haven't learned English yet. Paint tells the truth my tongue dodges. Pencil lines discover horizons inside my ribs. Paper accepts tears without criticism. Collage proves that torn pieces can become something beautiful together. Color remembers how to praise when words forget. I sign each attempt, gratefully, still here. I practice blessing people I passed. Drivers, shoppers, walkers on their own errands. Peace to you, strength to you, light for your day. I didn't have to know their stories to ask good for them. My heart softened when I sent quiet goodness into the world. I keep a witness list for those I name before God the way you light candles in a quiet chapel. I speak their names slowly, as if carrying glass with care. I ask for comfort, for direction, for a kindness to arrive at the right hour. I imagine mercy traveling the streets like a gentle courier. I trust that love crosses borders I cannot. I send a text or a note when prompted, small rivers from the same spring. We are held together thread by thread. I learned that gratitude is not a denial of sorrow. It is a door to presence. I named 5 things each evening, even on thin days, warm socks, a kind text, the way the sky changed color, the scent of rosemary, the sound of someone laughing 2 houses away. I told God, thank you for not withholding simple joys. These small thank yous added up to a wide mercy. I keep a mercy ledger that refuses to tally debts and only records gifts. A child's question that disarmed my cynicism. A cup of coffee that caught the light just right. A text that said, thinking of you. On a day I needed that thought. A joke that remembered how to be kind. A quiet 10 minutes that made an hour behave. By week's end, the pages argue persuasively for goodness. When fear of the future tried to rehearse disasters, I rehearsed trust instead. I will have the grace I need when I need it, not before. I asked God for right now strength, not next year control. Right now was enough to carry. Tomorrow could meet its own dawn with its own light. There is a benediction I speak over the future that does not pretend to know its hour-by-hour itinerary. I will have the grace I need when I need it. I will meet each day with the attention it deserves. I will carry love forward. I practice it not as a spell to control outcomes, but as a posture that sets my shoulders down and lifts my chin with holy expectation. The unknown is not empty. God is already there, and that changes the shape of my fear. I do not stockpile strength for crises that have not arrived. I receive today's portion like manna that refuses to be hoarded because it wants to keep me near. When anxiety knocks with its suitcase of worst-case scenarios, I open the door only far enough to say, "Not today," and return to the table where gratitude keeps a seat. I ended many days with the same quiet benediction. God, hold what I cannot, guard what I love, grow what is good, give me rest. I lay down as an act of faith. Morning kept arriving, and with it, the gentle proof that I am carried. Hope kept pace with me, one breath, one step, one whispered prayer at a time. I marked progress in teaspoons, not trophies. A morning without panic, a conversation where I chose kindness over cleverness, a walk that lasted 10 minutes longer than fear expected, a night of sleep that did not ask for explanations, a laugh that surprised me and stayed. These are my medals. I hang them in my chest. Hope did not arrive with trumpets. It came like dawn, slowly, quietly, stubbornly. At first, I noticed 5 good minutes in a day, then 10. Then a morning where laughter sprang out of me without permission and surprised me with its sweetness. I did not punish myself for that laughter. I took it as a sign that love was not diminished by joy. Love produces joy, even while it aches. I thanked God for every small goodness, and each thank you made more room for the next one to enter. I realized that grief is not a sign of love's failure. It is evidence of love's power. Changes us. It makes us tender, clarifies what matters. It teaches us to live in a way that honors those we miss. When I wanted to talk to God and felt nothing, I learned to borrow prayers. I borrowed the serenity to accept what I cannot change, the courage for what I can, the wisdom to discern the difference. I borrowed ancient words about green pastures and still waters and a shepherd who knows my name. I borrowed a simple blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you and give you peace. I spoke that blessing over my own heart, my home, the people who loved me, and the ones who struggled to show it. Borrowed words carried me until I had my own again. I cultivate curiosity as a doorway for comfort to enter without knocking. What is this ache trying to teach me about love? Where is the invitation inside this interruption? How might I bless what I cannot fix today? I ask small questions that open large rooms. I listen for answers that arrive as people, as lines of scripture, as birds on a wire. I say thank you before I understand. I also asked God for signs, not to prove he exists, but to remind me that love does. A certain bird at a certain window. A shaft of light at the exact moment I spoke a name. A song that played in a store I hadn't visited in years. I didn't try to turn these into grand messages or airtight meanings. I received them as kindness. When they came, I smiled and said, "I see what you did there." And when they didn't, I remembered that sometimes the sign is simply breath itself, the ordinary miracle of being alive one more day. Either way, gratitude met me at the door. Little by little, I learned to talk to God about the future without betraying the past. I said, "Teach me how to carry love forward." I asked for wisdom to honor the legacy of the one I lost by living well, by being kinder, more patient, more present, more honest. Grief taught me that time is a gift and attention is an altar. I told God I wanted to give my attention to what is eternal, faith, hope, love, and he helped me notice where to place it each day. A child's question, an old photograph, a neighbor's need, a sunrise that asked nothing of me except to notice it. I have come to understand that calling is not a spotlight on a stage, but the faithful lamp you carry down a hallway, illuminating enough of the floorboards to keep moving with kindness. Loss carved a room in me wider than I would have chosen, and God fills it with compassion that has learned my voice and now borrows my hands. I don't need a grand plan to honor the ones I miss. I need to love whoever is in front of me with a patience that doesn't consult the clock and a presence that doesn't check the mirror. Words matter, yes, but tone matters more, and attention most of all. I ask daily for a soft heart because soft hearts heal. Hard hearts shatter others. And somehow, in ordinary faithfulness, I feel myself becoming more fully the person love imagined when it first took root in me. Sometimes I wrote letters to God as if he were a dear friend away on a long trip. I wrote about the weight and the wonder, about the way ordinary tasks feel like climbing a hill, about how proud I am of the love we had and the person I am becoming. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer or tucked it into a book. Writing slowed my thoughts long enough for peace to catch up to them. It also gave me a place to lay down sorrow without losing track of it. Later, I would open the letter and realize how far I had come. God walked with me at a pace I could bear, and the page remembered it when I forgot. I asked God to bless my sleep, my meals, my work, my friendships, my quiet. I asked him to bless my memories and to bless my hopes. I asked him to bless the photographs in the frames, faces that still make my heart rise, and to bless the spaces where those faces would be if time were kinder. I learned that blessing is not denial. It is defiance against despair. It is a way of looking at what hurts and saying, "You will not have the final word. Love has the final word. God has the final word, and that word is life." I bless the night instead of bargaining with it. I dim lamps as if lowering my voice to hear mercy whisper. I lay down what I cannot solve like tools at the end of a shift. I cover myself with trust as with a blanket just warm enough. I remind my heart that God works well in the dark. I drift, not as escape, but as agreement with love's watchfulness. I wake to a room rearranged by peace. I rehearse hope the way musicians rehearse scales. Again, gently until muscle remembers. I speak future promises as if they already have a chair in my home. I practice imagining goodness without apologizing for the picture. I choose verbs that lean forward, grow, mend, return, bloom. I let my face learn the geography of soft expectation. I return to the window until the light arrives. I whisper, "Soon enough," and mean it. I carry gratitude like a small bell I can ring in any room. When fear gets loud, I tilt the bell toward the smallest mercy I can name. When sadness grows heavy, I ring for help and help arrives disguised as a friend. When boredom numbs me, I ring until wonder wakes up. The bell is not denial. It is attention trained toward the true. God hears it and answers with presence. Presence turns walls into doors. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, I noticed a new conversation unfolding between me and God. It was not only about grief anymore, it was about calling. Loss had carved a deeper room inside me, and into that room God poured compassion. I listened differently when people spoke of their struggles. I gave my time more freely, because I know how precious it is. I chose words more carefully, because I know how they land on a tired heart. I asked God to keep my heart soft, because soft hearts heal. Hard hearts break others. He answered that prayer by sending me people to love, and by sending me back to my own life with courage. I practice naming enough in a culture that worships more. This cup of coffee is enough to begin. This email draft is enough for today. This conversation is enough to seed tomorrow's trust. This body is enough to carry me through mercy's errands. This grace is enough because God is. Enoughness becomes my quiet anthem. I steward my questions as seeds, not grenades. I plant them in prayerful soil and give them water made of patience. I resist digging them up every hour to see if they've grown. I allow seasons to do their slow choreography inside my uncertainty. I welcome the sprouts that look nothing like the answers I imagined. I harvest wisdom when it is ripe and share it like bread. I thank the field for teaching me humility. I carry a pocket stone to remember that hardness can be softened by faithful rivers and time. When worry spikes, I hold it and let its coolness argue with my heat. I imagine my edges rounding under mercy's patient current. I place it beside a candle at night, weight and light keeping vigil together. I pray, make me both grounded and luminous. I sleep with that paradox humming like a lullaby. Morning finds me more possible than yesterday. I relearn all like a language I once spoke but forgot in the noise. I step outside at dusk and let the sky tutor my silence. I count 3 stars and call them promises I can point to. I listen for crickets and remember the world keeps singing without my management. I watch the moon and practice being beautifully borrowed light. I let wonder loosen the knot's anxiety tied. I go to bed bigger on the inside. When I visit the place of memory now, I do not go empty-handed. I bring a prayer. Thank you for the gift of this love. Hold them. Hold me. Keep us close in the ways that matter most. I stand for a while and listen. Sometimes wind in the trees answers me. Sometimes an old story rises. Sometimes only the steady beat of my own heart. I receive each as part of the same reassurance. I am not alone. I never was. I never will be. This is how I talk with God in times of grief. I begin with breath. I speak the truth. I let silence hold me. I bring my anger, my tears, my love. I bless what was, I bless what is, I bless what will be. And in that blessing, I am carried, step by step, into a future where love, somehow, keeps finding a way. On days when words feel far away again, I go back to the first prayer. God, I'm here. I put my hand over my heart. I breathe in and out, slow and steady. I trust that showing up is enough for this moment. I trust that God is listening, even to my silence. I trust that love remembers me, that heaven is closer than I think, that every ache is seen, every tear is counted, every sigh is a seed planted in soil I cannot yet see. And I trust that one day, when the light is just right and the air feels like a warm hand on my shoulder, I will discover that hope has grown tall while I wasn't looking. I will sit quietly and realize that I am speaking to God with ease again, and that the conversation never really stopped. It simply carried me through. I keep my end-of-day benediction simple and sturdy, like a chair that holds my weight without asking for poetry. Keep me faithful to love. Keep me close to your nearness. Keep me soft where the world goes hard. I offer the day back unpolished, fingerprints and all, trusting that God prefers honesty over shine. I thank my body for carrying me, my mind for trying again, my heart for staying teachable. I forgive the missteps that scuffed the afternoon and celebrate the small obediences that made a path. I lay down my watch, my phone, my worries, each like a stone beside the bed. I turn toward rest the way flowers turn toward evening, unafraid of closing. And I sleep in the gentle certainty that morning knows where to find me. I end each day where I began, open-handed, breathing, honest. God, hold what I cannot. Guard who I love. Grow what is good. Give me rest. I let that blessing settle in my bones like evening rain. I remember the conversation never stopped. It carried me home again. I close my eyes trusting that love keeps watch better than I do. I sleep in the mercy I cannot measure. I wake, and the mercy wakes with me. At day's end, I return to the simplest prayer I know, the one that began this whole journey and keeps me from pretending I am further along than I am. God, I'm here. I place my hand over my heart and breathe like someone who has remembered the instructions for being human. I do not offer a catalog. I offer a presence. I trust that you have heard everything I did not say, that you will hold everything I cannot carry, that you will keep everything I love in a way that does not require my strength to succeed. I lie down in that trust, which is to say I let the earth turn without my supervision, and I sleep. In the morning, I will wake to a mercy that has been working the night shift, and I will rise to meet it. Not triumphantly, not theatrically, but truly. And truly is enough. I end this prayer the way I live it, open-handed. God, keep me faithful to love. Keep me gentle with my own heart and with the hearts of others. Keep me awake to beauty. Keep me brave enough to remember and brave enough to laugh and brave enough to keep walking. And when grief returns, as it does, teach me once more to breathe, to listen, to speak your name, and to be still in your closeness. This is how I talk with you in times of grief. This is how you talk back. Not always in words, but always in love. And love is enough for now. Amen.